Every age has its light and its shadow. In ours, the shadow is imitation, the quiet disease of the human spirit. We copy what we admire, repeat what we are told, and conform to what feels safe. But in doing so, we forget the sacred duty that Iqbal calls the essence of being human: to create. To imitate is easy, to create is divine. The difference between the two is the difference between echo and voice. An echo repeats what has already been spoken. A voice gives birth to something new. Iqbal saw in his own time a world enslaved by imitation. Nations repeating the patterns of others. Minds afraid to think for themselves. And souls content to borrow their light instead of kindling their own flame. He called this the tragedy of the modern world. That man, who was born to be a creator, has become a mirror. A mirror reflects light but has none of its own. It shines only when something else shines upon it. And when the light is gone, the mirror returns to darkness. So too does the human spirit when it lives by imitation. Imitation kills the inner fire of Khudi. It makes us dependent on the approval of others, on their ideas, their tastes, their ways of life. We begin to measure ourselves not by truth, but by comparison. We forget that every soul is a unique expression of the divine, and no one can walk the path of another without losing themselves. Iqbal reminds us that Khudi, the self, is not meant to be a shadow of another's greatness. It is meant to be a light in its own right. To be yourself in a world that demands imitation is the first act of spiritual courage. This courage is rare because imitation is rewarded. Society praises conformity and punishes originality. Schools teach repetition, not discovery. Culture sells imitation as success. To look the same, think the same, live the same. But the price is high, the death of the creative soul. The creative person, Iqbal tells us, is not reckless. They are not a rebel for the sake of rebellion. They are a builder of new worlds. A person who listens deeply to the rhythm of their own being. And through that rhythm, hears the pulse of the universe itself. Creation, in Iqbal's view, is not limited to art or poetry. It is the spiritual act of bringing something new into existence. A thought, a gesture, a movement, a vision. Whenever you dare to live authentically, you are creating. Whenever you express truth from your own center, you are creating. Imitation is the silence of fear. Creativity is the voice of faith. Faith in what? Faith in the divine energy that moves through you. The certainty that you were not created to be a copy, but a contribution. Iqbal warns us that entire civilizations decline when imitation becomes their habit. A people who lose their creative fire begin to live on borrowed meanings. They speak the language of others, dream the dreams of others, and finally, forget their own soul. To imitate blindly is to betray your own divine trust. For God created you not as a repetition, but as a possibility that never existed before. When you choose to live as a mirror, you betray the flame that was placed within you at birth. Every era needs those who break this chain, who stop echoing and begin speaking. The world does not evolve through imitation. It evolves through originality. Through those rare individuals who, in moments of solitude and faith, choose to become creators of meaning. Iqbal says that the universe itself is unfinished. That creation continues through human participation. To create, therefore, is to take part in the divine act. It is to say with your life, I, too, am a spark of that eternal fire. This is the beginning of freedom. Not political freedom, not economic freedom, but the freedom of the soul. For the self cannot be free as long as it depends on borrowed light. In the next movement of thought, Iqbal takes us deeper into this struggle. To understand what it means to live as the flame rather than the mirror. To become a source of light instead of a reflection of it. Why do we imitate? Because imitation is safe. It gives us the illusion of belonging, the comfort of the familiar. To imitate is to hide behind the patterns of others. To escape the anxiety of standing alone. But Iqbal reminds us that this comfort is a prison. He calls it the spiritual laziness of the age. A refusal to confront the challenge of one's own individuality. The self is like a seed. If it remains buried, it will never become a tree. And imitation keeps it buried. The imitator fears failure. But the creator understands that failure is sacred. It is the way life teaches those who dare to begin. The imitator seeks perfection in the eyes of others. The creator seeks authenticity in the eyes of truth. Imitation is the product of fear. Creativity is the fruit of love. When a person loves truth, they cannot remain silent. When a soul burns with love for life, it must express itself. That expression, however small, is the first spark of creation. Iqbal teaches that every great idea, every spiritual revolution, begins in solitude. When an individual withdraws from the noise of imitation and listens to the inner flame, the prophet, the poet, the philosopher, all begin by hearing a voice no one else can hear. They trust that voice, even when the world laughs. And through that trust, new civilizations are born. This is why Iqbal says, the birth of the self is the death of fear. To be creative is to be fearless. Not because you know the outcome, but because you trust the source that inspires you. The imitator looks outside for approval. The creator looks within for guidance. This shift, from outer dependence to inner trust, is the true awakening of Khudi. When the self learns to draw its power from within, it stops echoing and starts singing. It no longer repeats what others have said. It begins to say what only it can say. This is the voice of the flame, the inner light that needs no reflection. Iqbal saw creativity not as privilege but as responsibility. He believed that every human being carries within them a unique idea of God, a reflection of the infinite shaped by their own experience. To express that inner idea through life, action, or art is the purpose of existence. Therefore, imitation is not just an intellectual weakness. It is a moral failure. It denies the divine trust within you. When you copy blindly, you abandon your role in creation. The creative person, on the other hand, understands that life itself is a conversation with God. Every act of imagination, every honest thought, is a response to the divine whisper, be. Iqbal's poetry reminds us that the universe responds to those who dare to act. He writes that when the self becomes strong, the laws of destiny themselves begin to bend around it. Creation welcomes the co-creator. But this path is not easy. The creator must walk alone for a time, must endure misunderstanding, rejection, and doubt. Originality often appears as madness to those who fear change. Yet, it is precisely through such solitude that the self gains strength. Iqbal often compared the creative person to a mountain eagle, flying alone in the thin air, close to the sun, while others remain safe in the valley. The eagle's solitude is not loneliness. It is the price of vision. In solitude, the self learns to see the world from above, to understand its hidden patterns, its possibilities, its beauty, and its pain. And from that vision comes creation. Not imitation of the world, but transformation of it. Iqbal believed that the highest form of creativity is moral creativity. To shape character, to refine conscience, to make the self a mirror of divine intention. Such a person does not merely create art or ideas. They create themselves. This is the meaning of his philosophy of Khudi. To live as a continuous act of creation. To recreate yourself every day. To evolve through struggle. To become a true image of the divine with every choice. The imitator seeks comfort. The creator seeks growth. And growth, as Iqbal tells us, is always painful. It requires breaking the shell of habit, challenging the patterns of thought that keep us small. But in that pain lies rebirth. For when the old self dies, the true self begins to breathe. And the fire that once seemed distant reveals itself as your own inner light. When the self begins to create, something miraculous happens. The world, which once appeared fixed and external, starts to move in harmony with the inner rhythm of the soul. Life no longer feels like a chain of accidents. It becomes a dialogue between your will and the will of God. This, Iqbal says, is the secret of human greatness. That God did not create man to be a spectator, but a participant in his ongoing creation. To live creatively, therefore, is not merely to invent or discover. It is to cooperate with the divine will. Every moment of sincere creation, whether in art, thought, or compassion, is an echo of the divine command, be. Iqbal writes that Khudi is like a spark of that divine fire. When it is weak, it merely warms the self. When it is strong, it begins to illuminate the world. To strengthen Khudi is to nurture that spark until it becomes a sun. But this flame must be protected. The enemies of creativity are not only ignorance and fear. They are also comfort, imitation, and blind tradition. A tradition that does not evolve becomes a cage. A culture that does not question itself begins to decay. Imitation can wear the mask of loyalty. But it is loyalty without understanding. It repeats the past without renewing its spirit. True fidelity, Iqbal says, is not to preserve the ashes of the past, but to carry its flame forward. This is why he admired prophets and poets. Not because they destroyed traditions, but because they renewed them. They returned to the source of inspiration and reawakened life in what had become lifeless. Civilizations rise and fall according to their creative power. When people stop imagining, stop questioning, stop creating, their history begins to end. The soul of a nation dies long before its body does. It dies when its people lose faith in their own power to create meaning. Iqbal saw this danger clearly. He witnessed societies that once burned with spirit sink into imitation. Imitating their conquerors, their enemies, even their past selves. He called this intellectual slavery, the acceptance of borrowed ideals, in place of the fire of selfhood. And yet, he never despaired. For he believed that within every person, no matter how dimmed by imitation, there remains a spark, the flame that can still be kindled. That spark is the divine trust, the ability to imagine a better world, and the will to bring it into being. The first act of creativity, Iqbal says, is the act of believing that creation is possible. When you stop believing that you can shape life, you stop truly living. You become a mirror again, reflecting what already exists instead of expanding it. But when belief returns, the self reawakens to its power. You begin to see that every idea, every emotion, every choice is a creative act shaping your destiny. The artist who paints, the thinker who questions, the worker who builds with integrity, the parent who nurtures with love. Each is a creator in their own sphere. This is the democracy of the divine spirit. That creativity belongs to all, not to a chosen few. And when individuals begin to live this way, as conscious creators, a culture of renewal is born. Society becomes alive again. Its faith deepens, its art awakens, its vision expands. Iqbal dreamed of such a civilization, a world where faith and reason, art and science, heart and intellect move together toward a higher purpose. He believed that creativity is not the enemy of faith. It is its fulfillment. For faith without creation is static, and creation without faith is blind. Together, they form the complete human being, the one who knows, loves, and acts. When you live as the flame, you stop fearing shadows. When you live as a creator, you stop asking for permission to exist. You realize that you were never meant to repeat what others have done. but to continue what God began. This realization transforms everything. Work becomes worship. Solitude becomes communion. Struggle becomes joy. And life, every heartbeat, every breath, becomes a creative prayer. Iqbal ends Khudi with a message of hope. That the flame of selfhood, once awakened, can never again be extinguished. It burns quietly, tirelessly, illuminating not only the path of the individual, but the destiny of all humanity. So choose to be the flame, not the mirror. Choose to create, not to imitate. For every moment of true creation is a moment of divine partnership, a spark of eternity shining through the finite self. And when that light shines through you, you will discover what Iqbal called the joy of being the instrument of the infinite.